Hello everyone, this is Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, and tonight we're going to study paper 93, Machiventa Melchizedek. And that starts on page 1014 of the Urantia book, or paper 9301. And let's say a little prayer and we'll get started. Father, thank you for bringing us together tonight that we might study this wonderful book. We're starting on a new paper, new direction tonight, and the 4 papers on Melchizedek. So open our hearts and minds that we might learn something and compare it to what's in the Bible about Melchizedek and the teachings of Abraham, that sort of thing. We thank you for giving us this opportunity to meet together in fellowship, and we pray that your will be done in this meeting and that we can share it with you. We thank you and we give you the praise in your Son, Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. Okay, Machiventa Melchizedek. Thank you. I guess I'll start reading tonight. Paper 93, Machiventa Melchizedek. The Melchizedeks are widely known as emergency sons, for they engage in an amazing range of activities on the worlds of a local universe. When an extraordinary problem arises, or when something unusual is about to be attempted, it is quite often the Melchizedek who accepts the assignment, and the ability of the Melchizedek sons to function in emergencies and on a widely divergent levels of the universe, even on the physical level of personality manifestations peculiar to their order. Only the life carriers share any degree of this metaphoric range of personality function. And I want to go, you see I've hit that link earlier in the day and it's already up here. I want to go to it. And this is the link on the Melchizedek sons. Swap over here. And what I want to go over with you on this is some of the information on what a Melchizedek son is. Okay? And you notice it says here, they are. And it's got a whole list of things underneath it. And I'm just going to kind of go through those really quickly. By nature, unprejudiced observers. They're the chief aides of Gabriel, created by the Creator Son, Mother Spirit, and the Father Melchizedek. The Father Melchizedek is the very first Melchizedek created in the local universe. They're a dominant influence on Jerusalem. They're halfway between God and man, known as emergency sons, life carriers to mid-Sinite worlds. So they take the life plasma to the mid-Sinite worlds. They're a local universe sons of God. So they are considered creations of Michael, the creative Mother Spirit, and the Father Melchizedek. They're not infallible in judgment, and they quite often are receivers of defaulting planetary governments. And that's what happened on our planet. There's 12 Melchizedek receivers that took over when Caligasta rebelled. And they're self-governing. Also, it mentions here that Michael did a bestowal as a Melchizedek son, okay, in one of his 7 bestowals. They can easily make themselves visible to humans. Okay, they have never betrayed their trust. None of them have ever gone into rebellion. Their home world is the sphere of Melchizedek. They're listed in the personality registers. And Jesus was said to be held a priest after the order of Melchizedek. But actually, Jesus was the creator of the Melchizedeks. Mortals are sometimes permitted to see them, and that's what happened during this incarnation, because Melchizedek was actually incarnated in a human form. He wasn't just made visible, he actually took a human body. Okay? They have no powers of reproduction, and they reside in the Jerusalem circles. And we know that Jerusalem is our capital. And there's a whole other list down here of the other things they've done and do as far as their service goes. And I'll let y'all look those up on your own. All you got to do is hit that link and you can go to that. I don't want to go belabor this too far. Yes?
That chart you just had up is not focused.
Could you repeat that?
Can you move a little closer to your mic, Rodney? I
Yeah,
can't.
I'm sorry. The previous chart on the Melchizedek was not focused in.
The previous chart.
Was what?
It's out of focus, is that what you said?
Oh yeah, probably on this, but if you click that link at home in your leisure, you'll be able to see it. It just brings up the web page, okay? And you'll be able to read it. There was no way for me to make that visible to y'all without changing the whole slide thing. So that's why I think. But if you hit this link in the slides, you notice it shows a web page. It'll take you right to it, okay? And that's on our website. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. And Millie, would you take the next one?
Yes. The Melchizedek order of universe friendship has been exceedingly active in New Hampshire. The core of 12 served in conjunction with the life carriers. A later core of 12 became receivers for your world shortly after Calagastia's secession and continued probably until the time of Adam and Eve. These 12 Melchizedeks returned to Uracha upon the default of Adam and Eve, and they continued thereafter as planetary receivers on down to the day when Jesus of Nazareth, as the Son of Man, became the titular planetary prince of Uracha.
So there were 12. There were 12 that came with the life carriers originally. Okay, and those 12 hung around with the life carriers after life was implanted on the planet. And then when Calagasta came 500,000 years later, after life was started on the planet, they took over receivership of the planet because he had defaulted. And so they stayed in control until Adam and Eve came. They turned over the planet to Adam and Eve. They left, went back to Jerusalem, and as soon as Adam and Eve defaulted on their mission, they came back and took over the receivership of the planet once again, and they stayed on all the way through the time of Christ. Now, it's interesting that when Christ was here, he asked the 12 receivers to stay even after his bestowal. So we've had the same 12 Melchizedeks, as far as we know, since those days. And it's also interesting to find out that our vicegerent planetary prince is Machiventa Melchizedek, who we're studying tonight. Okay, and he has been the head of the planet once before, after his bestowal as one of the 24 counselors. All right, so he has been in charge of the planet by himself once before, but he has not taken over as vicegerent planetary prince until Christ decides for him to do that. He will not take that position. So to this day, he hasn't moved to do that. Okay, and that's kind of the background. So the Melchizedeks, in essence, are our teachers when we go to the mansion worlds. Okay? They assign all the teaching that goes on through all 7 of the mansion worlds in Jerusalem. So we will interact with some type of Melchizedek all the way through our ascension plan through the 7 the 7 mansion worlds. Okay? All right? Yeah.
Obviously, Melchizedek takes over Uracha.
Yeah, he took on the form of humans when he came to Uracha. That's correct.
No, I mean, the 7 mansion worlds, you go to the Uracha field.
What was the question?
Something about pointing to the Morancha. You know what, Rodney, it's hard to hear you, I'm sorry. Can you just speak a little closer to your microphone or pull your
I don't
mic?
even know what I'm not doing. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little better there. So what was the question again?
Well, when the mansion was, obviously Melchizedek takes on the form of a monarch.
Yeah, well, yeah, we assume that he would take on the form of a Morancha being, but that's not necessarily true because since they can make themselves visible to even humans, they probably can make themselves visible in their own form to Morancha beings because they're kind of in between a spirit and an immortal. So they probably at will can make themselves visible to the Morancha beings, and that's probably how they present themselves on the mansion worlds, rather than take on the Morancha form. I would think anyway. That's just speculation, though, right here.
Well, it did say that they can take on the form very easily.
Yes, yeah, very easily. Okay, Tim, would you take the next one?
Revealed truth is threatened by one, Machiventa incarnation. Revealed truth is threatened with extinction. During the millenniums which followed the miscarriage of the Adamic mission of erection. While making progress intellectually, the human races were slowly losing ground spiritually. About 3000 BC, the concept of God had grown very hazy in the minds of men.
So by around 3000 BC, before Christ, we had, time had gone to the point where the human being had kind of lost its concept of God the Father. Okay, so Machiventa came to the earth with permission from whoever's in charge of them, and to kind of reveal God the Father, to reintroduce God the Father into the religions of the day, right? All right. So, Ron, could you take the next one, please?
I have to read from the front to front.
Okay.
Anyway. It's going to be difficult.
And you can't see the slide that Diane's.
It's not all there.
Oh, it's not. Is it on there?
It's on there. I mean, it's up there on the screen.
No, I'm talking about the one on the computer that
The
you're
left
sharing.
side and the top margins are.
Really?
Let me see if I can fix that.
It seems to be, well, you can't see it.
Hang on, let me take a quick look. Hang on, let me come around to this side. Maybe it's where I have it positioned on the have it positioned on the page. Let me see if I can just kind of move it over a little bit.
I can see it on mine.
Yeah, you can see it on mine too, it's just perfect.
Okay, all right.
Now it's
Is that better?
blurry, now I can't read it.
Oh,
Can't-
you can't read it?
No,
All right, let me move it back.
it was fine before, but now I can't.
All right.
I can still read it.
Is that any better?
No.
So now,
No, hang on.
you need to look in.
Let me see if I can just, let me see if I can get this one. Is that any better?
No, it's not as clear as what it used to be.
Okay. How about now? No better? How's that?
That's much better, yeah.
Okay.
See.
All right.
Can you see it, Rodney?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Sorry.
Hey, the 12 Melchizedek receivers, you and Mike is into the story from their family. They would not know what seed they would grow. Therefore, they come to me and solemn council, they petitioned the Most High's arbitration of some provision be made for maintaining the light of truth on the rancher. His plea was dismissed with the mandate that, quote, the conduct of affairs in 606 of September is fully in the hands of the Melchizedek custodian. The receivers then appealed to the father of Melchizedek for help, but only received word that they should continue to uphold truth in the matter of the royal election, quote, until the arrival of the bestowed son, who, quote, would rescue the private items from forfeiture and uncertainty.
So the Melchizedeks were concerned about losing all concept of God before a bestowal son arrived. And they did not know the time or the date that he would come, right? Just like we don't know those things. So they decided to appeal to the Most Highs for instruction on what to do, and the Most Highs kicked it back to them, basically saying, it's in your hands to keep the light of truth alive. And so they appealed to the father Melchizedek, and he gave them the same answer. So they chose, they felt like they had the right to do this incarnation or this bestowal to keep the truth of God alive. Okay, and that's where we were when Machiventa made his appearance. All right.
And it was a consequence of having been thrown so completely on their own resources that Machiventa Melchizedek, one of the 12 planetary receivers, volunteered to do that which had been done only 6 times in all the history of Nebadon, to personalize on earth as a temporary man of the realm, to bestow himself as an emergency son of world ministry. Permission was granted for this adventure by the authorities, and the actual incarnation of Machiventa Melchizedek was consummated near what was to become the city of Salem in Palestine. The entire transaction of the materialization of this Melchizedek son was completed by the planetary receivers with the cooperation of the life carriers, certain of the master physical controllers, and other celestial personalities resident on the rancho.
So they created a body for him, literally, so he could do this incarnation. Now it also mentions that this is consummated near what was they considered Salem. And we know that Salem eventually turned into what? Jerusalem. That's right. That's right. All right. 2. The Sage of Salem. It was 1973 years before the birth of Jesus that Machiventa was bestowed upon the human races of Urantia. His coming was unspectacular. His materialization was not witnessed by human eyes. He was first observed by mortal man on that eventful day when he entered the tent of Emdon, a Chaldean herder of Sumerian extraction. And the proclamation of his mission was embodied in the simple statement which he made to this shepherd: I am Melchizedek, priest of El Elyon, the Most High, the one and only God. So he walked in the tent and introduced himself, right?
Roger,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about the body they created for him.
Yeah.
Apparently it doesn't say anything about him leaving any type of light plasma from the body.
No, because these were the life carriers and mechanical physical controllers that transformed him into a human, right? The life carriers had the original plasm they inserted into the ocean, right? So they probably took the chemical makeup of that and just created him a DNA body out of the current men of the time. And so he'd look just like the men of the time.
Hey, Roger.
Yeah.
It also mentions his materialization. There was no sort of escort or seraphim transport involved.
Well, Melchizedeks are transported by seraphim. So he was, but the thing is, he was already on the planet. Okay? So it was not that he had to be transported, he just had to be put in a human body, a human form, because he could have made himself visible. That would have shocked the Bedouins to the point they'd probably all drop dead from fear, you know. So by him going into a physical body, that it made him more acceptable to the people he was trying to communicate with. And probably just like the Calagasta 100, they probably gave him a body that was extremely large, you know, because he had to be manufactured. So he was probably 7 or 8 foot. And that already made the Bedouins afraid of him, because he would have to be in danger of his life if that wasn't the case. You know? So they probably they probably thought of him more like a god. Okay? Just like in Ancient Aliens, when we talk about the Phoenicians thinking that the descendants of Nod were gods and that sort of thing. So.
You know, even when we go to a restaurant though, and you see a man or a woman, I've seen some really tall women too, but men in particular, you know, you see a 7.5, you know, tall man, and it's like, it's intimidating.
It is. It is. Okay. Millie, would you take the next one, please?
Yes. When the herder had recovered from his astonishment, and after he had plied the stranger with many questions, he asked Melchizedek to sup with him, and this was the first time in his long universe career that Melchizedek had partaken of material food, the nourishment which was to sustain him throughout his 94 years of life as a material being.
Because they didn't have to eat, did they? They took nourishment from the universe, okay, the circuits. So this was the first time when Melchizedek, he ever had a real physical meal, because they weren't necessary. Tim, would you take the next one?
And that night, as they talked out under the stars, Melchizedek began his mission with the revelation of the truth of the reality of the world. When with a sweep of his arm, he turned to Amazon, Amdon, saying, Elyon, the Most High, is the divine creator of the stars, of the firmament, and even of this very earth on which we live, and he is also the supreme God of God.
Okay, El Elyon was the concept during that period of time of God the Father. Okay, so that's what he's talking about, El Elyon. And that's where he started his revelation to. Right? And we know that this is the third epical revelation of God to man, was to Melchizedek, right? Okay. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
Within a few years, Melchizedek gathered around himself a group of people, disciples, and believers who formed an influence with the name of community of saints. He was soon made a rock millstone as a priest without payment, most high, and as a saint of sin. Among some of his surviving tribes, he was often referred to as the sheep or queen of Salem. Salem was the site which, after the disappearance of Melchizedek, became the city of Judas, subsequently being called Jerusalem.
That's where Jerusalem came from.
In person.
Let me go.
Oh, excuse me.
Hang on. Here, let me go back to that slide.
Okay.
Notice here it says also, before we go on, that he was also often referred to as Sheik or King of Salem. That's because they all respected him, right? All right. Okay.
In personal appearance, Melchizedek resembled the then blended Nodites, and Sumerian peoples, being almost 6 feet in height and possessing a commanding presence. He spoke Chaldean and a half a dozen other languages. He dressed much as did the
Canaanite.
Canaanite priest, except that on his breast he wore an emblem of 3 concentric circles, the Satania symbol of the Paradise Trinity. In the course of his ministry, this insignia of 3 concentric circles became regarded as so sacred by his followers that they never dared to use it, and it was soon forgotten with the passing of a few generations.
Okay, there it is right there. He was 6 feet tall.
6 feet.
Yeah, 6 feet tall. To them, that was very tall
Mhm.
during that period of time, right? And he's had a commanding presence. So just being in his presence, they were probably in awe over him, right? He also spoke Chaldean and a half a dozen other languages, so he could communicate with many different people in their own language. And he dressed much as the Canaanite priest did, right? And it's interesting, this is where we, in the book, get the information about the concentric circles, right? Is the emblem that Melchizedek wore on his chest.
Roger, I have a problem.
You see?
Hello?
Yeah.
So obviously, this suggests that they not only made his body, but also his clothes.
Yeah, they probably made his clothes and an emblem that he wore around his neck. Yeah. So, you know, the beings that did this could manipulate matter like there was nothing to them, right? Okay. Who's that? Though Machiventa lived after the manner of the men of the realm, he never married, nor could he have left offspring on earth. His physical body, while resembling that of a human male, was in reality on the order of those specially constructed body used by the 100 materialized members of Prince Caligastus' staff, except that it did not carry the life plasm of any human race, nor was there available on Urantia the tree of life. Had Melchizedek had Machiventa remained for any long period on earth, his physical mechanism would have gradually deteriorated. As it was, he terminated his bestowal mission in 94 years, long before his material body had begun to disintegrate. 94 years old when he left. Millie.
Yes. This incarnated Melchizedek received a thought adjuster who indwelt his superhuman personality as the monitor of time and the mentor of the flesh, thus gaining that experience and practical introduction to Urantia problems and to the technique of indwelling an incarnated son, which enabled the spirit of the Father to function so valiantly in the human mind of the later Son of God, Michael, when he appeared on earth in the likeness of mortal flesh. And this is the only thought adjuster who ever functioned in 2 minds on Urantia. But both minds were divine as well as human.
Okay, so this thought adjuster served Melchizedek, and then he served again in Christ Michael, right?
Michael, when we talk about reincarnation, and you said that when somebody thought they remembered something from the past life, it was just the thought adjuster had done it before.
No, you misunderstood what I said, Millie. The thought adjuster can have experience in other beings and other planets, okay? So what I said was it's possible these thoughts that people are coming up with as reincarnation were a life on another planet of a being that this thought adjuster indwelled that did not survive. There's a big...
So it wasn't necessarily being on this planet.
No, it wouldn't have been a being on this planet. But thought adjusters, you have several different kinds of thought adjusters. One is a virgin adjuster and one is not. The non-virgin adjusters had indwelled beings on other spheres, other planets. So they would have all the memories of those beings that they served with while they were alive. Now, those beings, since the adjuster was not able to fuse with those beings, because those beings probably didn't survive, then they would be reassigned to another human. And that's the way that works. That's what I was saying about it's possible the memories that these people are coming up with are not really past lives of people on this planet, but it's past lives of humans or beings like humans on another planet. So, just possible.
And the repertoires also state that the only individuals that have experienced reincarnation is Carnegie.
That's right. That's correct. Now, another interesting thing too about that, before we get off of that, is that when we fuse with our adjusters after we get to the mansion worlds, all memories that that adjuster has, even of these past beings that they've been in, we will have as our memories also. So anything that the adjuster remembers will become part of our memories also. So it'll kind of expand our consciousness also.
But would we really believe, would we really feel that it was our own experience? As a
We would feel
personality?
it's our experience because we become one with the adjuster. Okay. Just it's hard to explain when you become part of a fragment of God the Father, right? Because you not only enlighten yourself to your own world, but you enlighten yourself to all the experience the adjuster has, and that includes the relationship with God the Father. So it's got to be a totally expanding experience when you fuse.
It's kind of like the Buddha, Roger, an awakening.
Yeah, maybe. We could have long discussions about that.
Well, the whole concept for walk-in,
Yeah.
it kind of fits into that, but
Yeah. All right. Who's up?
Millie just read.
Melly? Okay, it's you, Tim.
The incarnation.
Which one is
During the incarnation. It says, during the incarnation in the flesh, Machiventa was in full contact with his.
No, we skipped one. Hang on.
no, then that, you didn't change the screen yet.
I'm sorry. That's what it is.
Okay.
Okay. Go on, Tim. You were right.
With his 11 followers and 4 planetary custodians, but he could not communicate with other orders of celestial personalities. Aside from the Melchizedek receivers, he had no more contact with superhuman intelligences than a human being.
So he could communicate with the other 11 Melchizedeks on the planet, but no one else, right?
What do they mean when they say the word custodian?
Well, they're in charge of keeping the planet going and keeping the government of the planet, and the celestial government of the planet intact. So that's why they call them custodians. In other words, they hold the planet as far as the government goes until the next sun comes, the stole sun, or the new planetary prince arrives. So that's what their job is.
And when I hear that, I think about people cleaning.
Yeah, not the same kind of custodians. Okay. Robbie, thank you.
Three, Melchizedek's future. With the passing of the patriarch, Melchizedek organized his schools of science, accurately on the organ system which had been developed by the early priesthood.
Yeah, you did. Sethite priest.
Priest of the second. Even the idea of the tithing system, which was introduced by his later convert Abraham, is also derived from the lingering traditions of the methods of ancient Sethite.
Remember, the Sethites were started by Seth. right, who was a son of Adam's son, right? And that was during the second garden, and that's what they're talking about here. Okay, so, and they came up with the tithing idea, 10%. And that's how Melchizedek became a very strong, wealthy influence in Salem. Because when Abraham was converted, he required every tribe that he conquered to tithe 10% to Salem. Okay, because that's who he believed in at the time. But that wasn't right away. That happened later after Abraham became a convert. Okay. Probably one of the most important converts for Melchizedek was Abraham. Right. I'm going to find this out a little bit more.
Melchizedek taught the concept of one God and universal deity, but he allowed the people to associate this teaching with the constellation father of Melchizedek, whom he termed El Elyon, the Most High. Melchizedek remained all but silent as to the status of Lucifer and the state of affairs on Jerusalem. Then, afore the system's sovereign, had little to do with Urantia until after the completion of Michael's bestowal. To a majority of the Salem students, Adentia was heaven, and the Most High was God.
Now, we're talking about the Most High of Adentia, right? Who is basically the head of Adentia, or a constellation, right? Because they could not conceive of a God the Father yet. So he took this concept of El Elyon, which is a primitive concept, and basically plugged in the Most High so that they had some concept of the leadership of the universe.
Hey, Roger, I had a question.
Yeah.
Where it says that he allowed the people to associate this teaching with the constellation, so it would be Veronic's sons.
Right. That's
Is he
correct.
talking about just one Veronic's son, or is he talking about all of them?
No, he's talking about the three Verondidek sons of the constellation. And that's where the original concept of the Trinity actually came from. Okay? Is the three beings of the Most Highs. So he's really talking about those three. And he allowed them to do that because they could not conceive of a higher concept than that. Right?
That should be in paper 35, correct?
Yes, it is.
Where I can read about that?
Yeah, it is. Alright. Let's see, who's next? Ron? No, me? Okay. The symbol, the symbol of three concentric circles, which Melchizedek adopted as the insignia of his bestowal, a majority of the people interpreted as standing for the three kingdoms of men, angels, and God. And they were allowed to continue that belief. Very few of his followers ever knew that these three circles were emblematic of the infinity, eternity, and universality of the Paradise Trinity, of divine maintenance and direction. Even Abraham rather regarded the symbol as standing for the three Most Highs of Adentia. You see, there's what it is. As he had been instructed that the three Most Highs function as one. To the extent that Melchizedek taught the Trinity concept symbolized in his insignia, he usually associated it with the three Verondidek rulers of the constellation or of Melchizedek. So he allowed them to believe that the three Most Highs were the symbol of a Trinity. Okay?
So, hey, Roger,
Yeah.
I understand. So when we look at Paradise Trinity, that's basically what it means. Infinity, eternity, and what's the word universality mean in Paradise Trinity?
The universality means the incorporation of the three Trinity being omnipresent, omnipotent, they're everywhere at the same time. Okay?
So this symbol also recognizes as the Most High, so Veronic's sons?
Yeah, he allowed them to believe that it was symbolic of the three Veronidek sons, which are the three Most Highs.
And then
Right.
the creators of Michael also decked this symbol. did he take it over, or pretty much just, it really means, you know, like the infinity, eternity, universality, the paradise trinity?
Yeah, it really represents the paradise trinity. But I don't know that Christ ever even taught it during his life. We're at the last 3 papers of the life of Christ again, and I don't remember ever reading, many times as I've read it, I don't remember ever Christ teaching anything about the symbol. Right? They do say in the papers that the banner of Michael is those 3 concentric circles on a white background. But that was not, he did not teach the apostles that or anything like that.
Well, unless he did it quietly and they didn't speak about it,
That's
because he
right.
did, share
That's
some
right.
information.
Yeah. Alright, who we got next? You just read.
You just read.
I did? Okay. Millie, would you take the next one?
Yes, to the rank and file of his followers, he made no effort to present teachings beyond the fact that the rulership of the Most High's redemption, God of Urantia, but to some, Melchizedek taught advanced truths, embracing the conduct and organization of the upper universe, while to the brilliant disciple Nordan, the
Kenai, I'm sorry, you're right.
and his band of earnest students, he taught the truths of the super universes and even of our own.
So he picked and chose whom he wanted to know that information because most of them couldn't even understand it, right?
You know, that's incredible, because there's a lot of rabbis, I believe, that they will teach publicly, but yet in private, it could be a different story. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing hidden, but like, you know, something more personal. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, and like many teachers, they teach to the comprehension of their students.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing secretive, like, you know, Gnosticism or anything like that. It's just
No.
more down the circle. It's just, what they can find.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what Jesus did too.
Jesus did the same thing.
Yeah.
He taught the apostles things that he did not
All the
teach to
scriptures.
the general public. And in essence, we kind of do that too, if you don't even realize it. When you talk to people, especially about the Urantia book, you tell them about things you believe that they can comprehend. Because if you're not careful intellectually, you'll run right over them. In other words, they won't understand anything you're saying if you're not careful. So you have to keep it at a level that they can understand it. You know. Now, these things that we talk about, we're actually teaching the book. So everything is open, but that we're teaching it to. But this is not something that you just teach any Joe Blow walked off the street, because they probably would not understand what you're
They
saying.
would be overwhelmed.
They'd be overwhelmed. That's exactly right. Now, you can teach anybody the life of Christ, and anyone should be able to understand that entire.
No, not necessarily if you don't know what Morancha is.
Well, no, but you learn these things
As you go along,
As you
yeah.
go along. That's right. That's right.
And for those ignorant people, where they don't even read.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see, we just did that. Okay. Now I'm lost
My
again.
girlfriend called from Tennessee.
Really?
I got it all right.
Millie, would you take this one, please?
I just read, I think this one's two.
Oh, is it 10? Okay, I'm sorry.
The members of the family of,
Catra.
Ketro, with whom Melchizedek lived for more than 30 years, knew many of these higher truths long
Perpetuated.
perpetuated them in the family, even to the days of their illustrious descendant Moses, who thus had a compelling tradition in the days of Melchizedek, handed down to him his father's son, as well as through other sources in his ways.
So these truths that they taught this family were passed down generation to generation, and that's how Moses learned most of the information he had. Okay. is from the information that was passed down through this family. Rodney, I think you're up.
Melchizedek taught this world. All they had capacity to receive and assimilate. Even many modern religious ideas about heaven and earth, of man, God, and angels are not correlated in those teachings of Melchizedek. But this great teacher subordinated everything to the doctrine of one God, the universe future, heavenly creator, of the body thought. Emphasis was placed upon this teaching for the purpose of healing, commands, adoration, and of the preparing the way for the subsequent appearance of Michael as the son of this same universal Father.
And this is very important. We're going to find out later in this paper how important this is.
Melchizedek taught that at some future time, another son of God would come in the flesh as he had come, but that he would be born of a woman. And that is why numerous later teachers held that Jesus was a priest or minister forever after the order of Melchizedek.
Which is interesting because Melchizedek was created like Jesus. And this is the picture. I was trying to remember what this said. Oh, this is supposed to be Melchizedek and Abraham standing at the altar. And they're trying to discuss non-sacrificial ways to come to God. And thus did Melchizedek prepare the way and set the monotheistic stage of world tendency for the bestowal of an actual paradise son of the one God, whom he so vividly portrayed as the Father of all, and whom he represented to Abraham as a God who would accept man on the simple terms of personal faith. And Michael, when he appeared on earth, confirmed all that Melchizedek had taught concerning the paradise Father. By faith you are saved, right? It is only faith that is needed to become accepted and saved by God, right? Fatherhood of God, brotherhood of man, over and over and over. Right?
Yeah, I love how they had that good quote that says, "Ye shall not doubt that faith is the only requirement for eternal salvation."
The only requirement, right, Tim?
That's correct. The only requirement.
The only requirement for eternal salvation. That's right, not sacrifice. Millie, would you take the next one?
Yes. Number 4, the Salem religion. The ceremonies of the Salem worship were very simple. Every person who signed or marked the clay tablet rolls of the Melchizedek church committed to memory and subscribed to the following belief. 1. I believe in El Elyon, the Most High, God, the only universal Father and creator of all things. 2. I accept the Melchizedek covenant with the Most High, which bestows the favor of God on my faith, not on sacrifices and burnt offerings. 3. I promise to obey the 7 commandments of Melchizedek and to tell the good news of this covenant with the Most High to all men.
Okay, and that's all there was to it, right? But you see number 2 here. I accept Melchizedek covenant with the Most High, the bestowals of the favor of God on my faith, not on sacrifices and burnt offerings. So this is what he was trying to teach to Abraham, right?
So, hey, Roger,
Yeah,
the, once again, the Most High are those 3 Veronidec sons, correct?
that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
But notice here also, Tim, that he mentions the only universal Father, right? Because the Most Highs are the representation of God. Okay? The Veronidec sons, they are the representation of God to the local constellation. Okay? Pretty much what they say goes in the local constellation. Okay? Tim, would you take the next one?
And that was the whole decree of the same element. But even such, a short and simple declaration of faith was altogether too much and too advanced for the men of those days. They simply could not grasp the idea of getting divine favor for nothing. Faith. They were too deeply confirmed in the belief that man was born under a forfeit to the gods. Too long and too earnestly had they sacrificed and made gifts to the priest to be able to proclaim the good news of salvation and divine favor was a free gift who believed in the Melchizedek covenant. But Abraham did believe half-heartedly, and even that was counted for righteousness.
So he half-heartedly believed this. He felt too guilty about things to just not to stop sacrificing, right? He just believed by faith.
Hey Roger, in your opinion, what would be the best definition of the word faith according to the English book? It's more than a conviction, correct?
Yeah, it's more than the conviction. It's a awakening or a knowing to the point there is no doubt whatsoever in your heart, mind, your soul that something is so. And that's why we call it faith in God, because there's the only thing you can have true faith like that is God the Father, really.
And to me too, it's to know, but it's also a personal religious experience that's manifested in your life.
That's true. That's true, it is.
So to me, that's true faith.
Yeah. If you have true faith like that, Tim, it changes the way you live, not only in your daily life, but your reaction to everything and everybody.
It does.
Yeah. Okay. Next. Rodney, would you take the next one?
The seven commandments formally created and the festival, the pattern of all laws of the ancient and legislative supreme law, and very much the same. The seven commandments are from the first to the second commandment. These commandments are the same original law.
These are very close to the Dalmatian commands and the second garden commandments. Right?
1. You shall not serve any god but the Most High, Creator of heaven and earth. 2. You shall not doubt that faith is the only requirement for eternal salvation. 3. You shall not bear false witness. 4. You shall not kill. 5. You shall not steal. 6. You shall not commit adultery. 7. You shall not show disrespect for your parents and elders.
Alright. Remember the two great commandments? You love God the Father and love others as yourself. If you do those two, you include all that, right? You do this all night.
You know, that fourth one can be a pretty big challenge according to the Aramaic Hebrew. Because a lot of the individuals, they don't say kill, they say murder. They
Yeah.
make a distinction between them. Because when I watched the documentary, there's this very Christian guy that's always nagging people. He's saying, well, why do you eat animals? You're such a hypocrite. Your Bible says you shall not kill, and yet you're killing innocent animals. And then these individuals are like, no, the word means murder.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean kill. But the Aramaic is a completely different description. I believe they use the word kill.
Yeah.
But it belongs there.
Yeah. And it's interesting because as carnivores, we've been killing animals for food for many years. You know? So to just come along and say you should not kill, it's really not reasonable that you're going to teach every human being on the planet not to kill animals, right?
That certainly does eliminate animal
Yeah,
sacrifice.
animal sacrifice, that's right. That's right. But here they're talking about people, I'm sure, not animals. So.
Well, always make honor for even Jesus killed first.
Yeah, even Jesus killed fish and ate them, and he did have meat on occasion. That was not his preferred method of celebrating the Passover or anything like that. But as a guest, he would sometimes eat some of the Passover lamb in respect for his guests. And so it's a judgment call.
And then there's like a big growing debate whether or not he ate that big fish.
Yeah, I know.
That's just complete ignorance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
according to your rancher book, he did. So, all right. Did Ryan just read?
Diane just read.
Oh, Diane just read.
I
I'm
did.
not- I can't. I get on these conversations.
And I'm like, wow.
Well, no sacrifices were permitted within the colony.
That's right, of course I did.
Huh?
Of course I just read it.
Yeah. Melchizedek well knew how difficult it is to suddenly uproot long-established customs, and accordingly had wisely offered these people the substitute of a sacrament of bread and wine for their older sacrifice of flesh and blood. It is of record Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine. But even this cautious innovation was not altogether successful. The various tribes all maintained auxiliary centers on the outskirts of Salem where they offered sacrifices and burnt offerings. So they couldn't get them to stop. Even Abraham resorted to this barbarous practice after his victory over Leonor. He simply could not feel quite at ease until he had offered a conventional sacrifice. And Melchizedek never did succeed in fully eradicating this proclivity to sacrifice from the religious practices of his followers, even of Abraham.
One of your pagans that takes it.
That's right. It's interesting because so many religions came to consider Abraham their father, even today.
Just the word pagan is usually translated as country boy.
Yeah. All right. Millie, would you take the next?
Like Jesus, Melchizedek attended strictly to the fulfillment of the mission of his soul. He did not attempt to reform the Moors, to change the habits of the world, nor to promulgate even advanced sanitary practices or scientific truth. He came to achieve two tasks: to keep alive on earth the truth of the one God, and to prepare the way for the subsequent mortal bestowal of the paradise Son of that universal faith.
Just like Jesus, he had a singleness of purpose, right? His was to keep the concept of God alive and prepare the way for the paradise Son, right? What was Jesus's? To reveal the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, right? Very simple concept.
The personality and character of the universal.
That's right. All right. Tim, would you take the next one, please?
Melchizedek taught elementary revealed truth at Salem for 94 years. During this time, Abraham attended the Salem school 3 different times. He finally became a convert to the Salem teachings, becoming one of the Melchizedek's most great pupils and chief supporters.
So it was only 3 different times he actually came to the school, right? Wonderful. All right. Rodney.
Life is not to live. Although it may be a word to speak for chosen people, it is not a mistake to refer to Abraham as a chosen individual. Because of it, we may find Abraham the responsibility of keeping alive the one God as distinguished from the prevailing belief in plural deity.
Now y'all remember the history of Abraham all the way down through the Old Testament. All the characters of the Old Testament. This was
And
the... Huh?
his dad was an idol maker.
Yeah, his dad was an idol maker, that's correct. But all these people we learn about in the Old Testament were the result of this conversion of Abraham. Okay? And that's why this is very important.
He actually played a small little trick on his dad one time. And his dad awoke him one morning, and he saw all the statues completely crushed and broke to pieces. He
Yeah.
said, Abram, what happened? And he said, sir, that idol over there broke all of your idols. And instead said, what are you, nuts? That's more of your modern day version.
Okay. This is Abraham coming back from the battle and meeting Melchizedek on the road coming back from the battle. Melchizedek was actually going out to try to stop Abraham from destroying this whole city and village and tribe, every man, woman, and child, and he was too late. So this is him meeting him on the road coming back. That's what all this. All right. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
And the choice of Palestine as a site for Melchizedek's activities was in part predicated upon the desire to establish contact with some human family embodying the potentials of leadership. At the time of the incarnation of Melchizedek, there were many families on earth just as well prepared to receive the doctrine of Salem as was that of Abraham. There were equally endowed families among the red men, the yellow men, and the descendants of the Canaanites to the west and north. But, again, none of these localities were so favorably situated for Michael's subsequent appearance on earth as was the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea. The Melchizedek mission in Palestine and the subsequent appearance of Michael among the Hebrew people were in no small measure determined by geography, by the fact that Palestine was centrally located with reference to the then existent trade, travel, and civilization of the world.
So it was a geographic thing, right? It was a most desirable place for Jesus to come, so pick that area.
For some time, the Melchizedek receivers had been observing the ancestors of Abraham, and they confidently expected offspring in a certain generation who would be characterized by intelligence, initiative, sagacity, and sincerity. The children of Terah, the father of Abraham, in every way met these expectations. It was this possibility of contact with these versatile children of Terah that had considerable to do with the appearance of Machiventa at Salem, rather than in Egypt, China, India, or among the northern tribes.
Good blood, right? Terah and his whole family were half-hearted converts to the Salem religion, which had been preached in Chaldea. They learned of Melchizedek through the preaching of Abed, a Phoenician teacher who proclaimed the Salem doctrines in Ur. They left Ur intending to go directly through Salem, but Nahor, Abraham's brother, not having seen Melchizedek, was lukewarm and persuaded them to tarry in Haran. And it was a long time after they arrived in Palestine before they were willing to destroy all of the household gods they had brought with them. They were slow to give up the many gods of Mesopotamia for the one God of Salem. It's hard for them to get rid of the idol worshiping thing. Moses had the same problem. Okay. Lily.
A few weeks after the death of Abraham's father, Terah, Melchizedek sent one of his students, Jaron, the Hittite, to extend this invitation to both Abraham and Nahor. Quote, "Come to Salem, where you shall hear our teachings of the truth of the eternal Creator, and you, in the enlightened offspring of you two brothers, shall all the world be blessed." Unquote. Now Nahor had not wholly accepted the Melchizedek gospel. He remained behind and built up a strong city-state which bore his name. But Lot, Abraham's nephew, decided to go with his uncle Esau.
You know who that Lot they're talking about? No? same lot that was in Sodom and near Sodom and Gomorrah, right? All right. Tim.
Upon arriving at Salem, Abraham and Lot chose a hilly fastness near the city, where they could defend themselves against any surprise attacks of northern raiders. This time the Hittites, the Syrians, the Philistines, and other groups were constantly raiding the tribes of central and southern Palestine. In the stronghold in the hills, Abraham and Lot made frequent pilgrimages to Salem.
Because their chief work back then was staying off the people trying to attack them, right? Rodney, you take the next one, please?
Not long after they had established themselves near Salem, Abraham and Lot turned to the valley of the Nile to obtain food supplies, as there was then a drought in Palestine. During his brief sojourn in Egypt, Abraham found a distant relative on the Egyptian throne, and he served as a commander of two very successful military expeditions for this kingdom. During the latter part of his sojourn in the Nile, he and his wife, Sarah, lived at court, and when leaving Egypt, he was given a share of the spoils of his military campaign.
So that's how they rewarded their chief commanders and things, right?
It required great determination for Abraham to forego the honors of Egyptian court and return to the more spiritual work sponsored by Machiventa. But Melchizedek was revered even in Egypt, and when the full story was laid before Pharaoh, he strongly urged Abraham to return to the execution of his vows to the cause of Salem.
Interesting how Egypt and the pharaohs is even mixed up.
Abraham,
Abraham.
just to remind you, this is 10 sections.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to stop at, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more slides, and I'm going to cut it off for the night. We'll finish this next time. All right. Abraham had kingly ambitions, and on the way back from Egypt, he laid before Lot his plan to subdue all Canaan and bring its people under the rule of Salem. Lot was more bent on business, so after a later disagreement, he went to Sodom to engage in trade and animal husbandry. Lot liked neither a military nor a herder's life. So that's how Lot ended up in Sodom. Millie, would you take the next one, please?
Takes me a while to do that.
That's all
Upon returning with his family to Salem, Abraham began to mature his military projects. He was soon recognized as the civil ruler of the Salem territory and had confederated under his leadership 7 nearby tribes. Indeed, it was with great difficulty that Melchizedek restrained Abraham, who was finally revealed to go forth and round up the neighboring tribes so that they might thus more quickly be brought to a knowledge of the same truths. Do not kill.
Yeah. Yeah. Bring them in with the sword and make them believe, right?
It's like smacking a kid and say, don't hit your brother.
That's right. Tim, would you take the next one?
Melchizedek maintained peaceful relations with all the surrounding tribes. He was not militaristic and was never attacked by any of the armies as they moved back and forth. He was entirely willing that Abraham should form a defensive policy for Salem, such as was subsequently put into effect. But he would not approve of his people's ambitious schemes for conquest, for they were a friendly servants of relationship. Abraham going over to Hebron to establish a military capital.
Rodney.
Abraham, because of his close connection with the illustrious Melchizedek, possessed great authority over the surrounding petty kingdoms. They all revered Melchizedek and unto ruled Abraham. Abraham wielded his spirit, and only awaiting an opportune occasion to attack his neighbors. And this excuse came when some of these rulers presumed to raid the property of his nephew, Lot, who dwelt in Sodom. Upon hearing of this, Abraham, at the head with his 7 confederated tribes, moved on the enemy. His own bodyguard of 319 officered the army, numbering more than 4,000, which struck at this head.
That's a pretty good sized army, right?
Yeah, yeah.
When Melchizedek heard of Abraham's declaration of war, he went forth to dissuade him, but only caught up with his former disciple as he returned victorious from the battle. Abraham insisted that the God of Salem had given him victory over his enemies and persisted in giving 1/10 of his spoils to the Salem treasury. The other 90% he removed to his capital at Hebron.
After this battle of Siddim, Abraham became leader of a second confederation of 11 tribes and not only paid tithes to Melchizedek, but saw to it that all others in the vicinity did the same. His diplomatic dealings with the king of Sodom, together with the fear in which he was so generally held, resulted in the king of Salem and others joining the Hebron military confederation. Abraham was really well on the way to establish a powerful state in Palestine. We're going to stop there and continue next week. Section 6. Covenant with Abraham. Just say a little prayer and we'll close for a moment. Tim, would you like to close us in prayer?
Would it be okay if I pass?
Yeah, that's okay. That'll be fine. How about you, Rodney? Would you like to close us in prayer?
I think you said it.
Okay, I'll do it. Because of the echo. Father, thank you for bringing us together tonight that we might study this wonderful revelation. We pray that you'll open our hearts and minds as we go tonight, and we might teach this to others and bring some enlightenment to them. We thank you and we give you the praise in your Son, Michael Jesus of Nazareth. Amen. Thank you for joining us. Please come see us again. It's a good paper.